Earth versus Imperial Fleet. First document. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the view screen. His four arms crossed behind his back as he studied the primitive planet that had somehow managed to irritate the Galactic Imperial Council enough to warrant a full military response. The third planet from this unremarkable yellow star had been broadcasting radio signals into space for barely a century. Yet they had already committed the ultimate sin in the Empire's eyes. They had refused to surrender. The Imperial fleet stretched out in all directions around the flagship. 300 vessels of varying sizes, from massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking continents to swift interceptors designed to hunt down fleeing civilian ships. It was overkill. Zektar knew. But the Empire had learned long ago that overwhelming force prevented costly, prolonged conflicts. Most species surrendered the moment they saw even a fraction of this armada, but not the humans. "Admiral," called out his tactical officer, a thin Vorthan with pale blue skin, "we are receiving another transmission from the planet's surface." Zektar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "The same message as before?" "No, sir. This one is different. It appears to be coming from their largest population center on the western continent." "Put it through." The view screen flickered, and suddenly Zektar was looking at a human female. She appeared middle-aged by their species' standards, with graying hair pulled back severely and wearing what appeared to be their formal governmental attire. Behind her stood several other humans in military uniforms, their faces grim but determined. "I am President Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Council," the human said, her voice steady despite the massive fleet hanging over her world. "I assume you are the commander of this invasion force." Zektar stepped forward, his imposing 2.5-meter frame filling the transmission pickup. "I am Admiral Zektar of the Imperial Conquest Fleet. By order of the Galactic Imperial Council, your species will surrender unconditionally and submit to Imperial rule. You have one planetary rotation to comply, or we will demonstrate why resistance is futile." President Chen's expression didn't change. If anything, her jaw set more firmly. "Admiral, with all due respect, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We've reviewed your previous demands, and I'm afraid our answer remains the same. Earth does not surrender." A ripple of shocked clicks and chittering sounds echoed through the bridge. Zektar's own species, the Kelaks, were known throughout the galaxy for their military prowess. In his 4 decades of service, he had overseen the conquest of 17 worlds. Never had a species maintained their refusal after seeing the full might of an Imperial fleet. "Human," Zektar said, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "Perhaps you do not comprehend the situation. We have conquered worlds with populations in the hundreds of billions. Your entire species numbers barely 8 billion. We have weapons that can boil your oceans and crack your planetary crust. Your most advanced spacecraft can barely reach your own moon. What possible reason do you have to believe you can resist us?" Chen leaned forward slightly. "Because, Admiral, you clearly don't know much about humans. We've been fighting each other for our entire recorded history. We've survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, and our own stupidity. We've learned one thing above all else. When someone tries to take what's ours, we fight back. And we're very, very good at it." "Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels," Zektar scoffed. "Maybe not," Chen admitted. "But you're not fighting our weapons, Admiral. You're fighting us, and that's a mistake you're going to regret." The transmission ended abruptly. Zektar stared at the blank screen for a long moment, processing what he had just heard. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. The human's words had carried a conviction that seemed almost unsettling. "Sir?" his tactical officer ventured. "Your orders?" Zektar straightened. This was clearly some primitive psychological warfare attempt. The humans were trying to project confidence they couldn't possibly possess. Begin orbital bombardment of their major population centers. Target their governmental and military installations first. Once they see their leadership burning, they'll beg for mercy. Admiral, his sensor operator called out, her voice rising with alarm, I'm detecting massive energy signatures across the planet's surface. Thousands of them. Specify, Zektar commanded, moving to the sensor station. They appear to be launch signatures, sir. The humans are launching something. Multiple somethings. Readings indicate chemical propulsion systems, but the energy output is massive. On the main view screen, streaks of fire began rising from Earth's surface. Not just a few, but hundreds, then thousands. They rose from every continent, some from fixed installations, others from mobile platforms scattered across the planet's surface. Are those missiles? Asked the tactical officer. Impossible, Zektar said, but his voice carried less certainty. Scan them. Chemical propulsion cannot threaten vessels at our orbital distance. The sensor operator's fingers flew over her console. Sir, these aren't standard ballistic missiles. The humans appear to have strapped their nuclear weapons to their space launch vehicles. They're essentially firing their atomic arsenals at us. Zektar felt a chill run down his spine. The humans were using civilian space technology to deliver weapons of mass destruction. It was crude, inefficient, and absolutely insane. It was also, he realized with growing unease, potentially effective. Those weapons cannot penetrate our shields, he said. But even as he spoke, he was calculating trajectories and yield estimates. Sir, the sensor operator said quietly, they're not just launching nuclear weapons. These readings, they're launching everything they have. I'm detecting what appears to be kinetic kill vehicles, experimental weapon platforms, and, Admiral, some of these energy signatures don't match any known human technology. Zektar's 4 eyes widened. Explain. It appears the humans have been reverse engineering crashed Imperial scout ships, sir. Ships that were lost in this system over the past several years during our reconnaissance missions. The first wave of human weapons reached the outer edge of the Imperial formation. The escort frigates opened fire with their point defense systems, filling space with destructive energy beams. Most of the primitive human missiles were indeed destroyed, but not all of them. The ones that got through struck Imperial shields with surprising force. Damage report, Zektar commanded as the ship shuddered slightly. Shields holding, but those weapons pack more punch than expected, his damage control officer reported. Sir, the humans have somehow managed to enhance their nuclear weapons with what appears to be antimatter triggers. Antimatter. Zektar felt his confidence wavering. The humans weren't supposed to have antimatter technology. They shouldn't have been able to achieve controlled antimatter reactions for another 1,000 years, according to Imperial projections. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission, multiple transmissions actually. They appear to be coming from hidden installations across the planet's surface. Put them through. The view screen split into dozens of smaller windows, each showing a different human. Men and women of various ages and ethnicities, all wearing military uniforms or civilian clothing. But their eyes held the same fierce determination Zektar had seen in President Chen. This is General Martinez, North American Command. You wanted a fight? You've got one. Colonel Okafor, African Defense Force. We've been preparing for this day for 50 years. Admiral Zhang, Pacific Fleet. Our ancestors fought off invasion before. We'll do it again. General Volkov, Eastern European Command. We learned from the best, from each other. One by one, the human commanders signed off, returning to their duties. But their message was clear. Earth wasn't just refusing to surrender. Earth was going to fight back with everything they had. Sir, the tactical officer said, his voice tight with concern. Second wave incoming. This one's different. On the sensors, another massive launch was detected from Earth's surface. But these weren't missiles. They were ships, crude, ungainly vessels that looked like they'd been cobbled together from industrial equipment and whatever materials the humans could find. But they were armed, and they were fast. Those ships, Zektar stared at the readings. They're suicide vessels. Manned kamikaze attacks. The human ships accelerated toward the Imperial fleet with reckless abandon. Their engines burned so hot that several exploded from the stress, but the rest kept coming. As they closed the distance, Zektar could see that each ship was essentially a flying bomb, packed with nuclear weapons and whatever other destructive materials the humans could cram inside. "Sir, we're receiving a general transmission from those vessels," the communications officer reported. "Put it through." A young human male appeared on screen, barely old enough to be considered an adult by his species' standards. Behind him, Zektar could see the cramped interior of one of the suicide ships. "My name is Lieutenant Jake Morrison," the human said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm 23 years old. I was supposed to get married next month. Instead, I'm going to ram this ship full of nuclear weapons into your flagship and take as many of you bastards with me as I can." Around him, other humans could be seen at various control stations, all young, all volunteers. "You don't have to do this," Zektar found himself saying. "Your deaths will accomplish nothing." Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You're wrong about that, Admiral. Our deaths will accomplish something very important. They'll show you that humans don't give up. Ever. And they'll buy our planet time to hurt you even worse." The transmission cut out as Morrison's ship, along with dozens of others, slammed into the Imperial formation. The explosions were visible even from the flagship's position, and the shockwaves rattled vessels throughout the fleet. "Damage report," Zektar barked. "We've lost 17 escort vessels, sir. The dreadnought Eternal Conquest has suffered severe damage and is falling out of formation." Zektar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His professional military force, equipped with the finest weapons and shields the Empire could provide, had just taken significant casualties from a species that had achieved spaceflight less than 70 years ago. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting something else. The planet's electromagnetic signature is changing. It looks like they're powering up some kind of massive installation." "Where?" "Multiple locations, sir. But the largest signature is coming from their North American continent. Energy readings are unprecedented." On the main view screen, a section of what the humans called the Rocky Mountains began to move. Not shift or crack, but actually move aside, revealing a massive installation hidden beneath. Energy readings spiked off the charts as something enormous began to emerge from the hidden facility. "What in the name of the Empire is that?" Zektar whispered. As the hidden doors fully opened, the answer became terrifyingly clear. It was a weapon. A massive, obviously human-built energy weapon that looked like it had been constructed from cannibalizing hundreds of smaller installations. Crude wiring and industrial framework were visible along its length, but the energy readings coming from the device were anything but primitive. "Sir, that weapon is charging. Energy output is approaching critical levels." Zektar felt a cold understanding wash over him. The humans hadn't just refused to surrender. They had been preparing for this invasion. Somehow they had known the Empire was coming, and they had spent decades getting ready. "Full reverse thrust," he ordered. "Get us out of range of that weapon." But it was too late. The massive human weapon fired, sending a beam of concentrated energy screaming across space. It struck the Imperial dreadnought Iron Fist squarely amidships. The ship's shields, designed to withstand the most powerful weapons in the Imperial arsenal, held for exactly 3 seconds before collapsing. The dreadnought, one of only 12 in the entire Imperial Navy, simply ceased to exist. Silence fell across the bridge of the Dominion's wrath. Zektar stared at the empty space where a ship carrying 8,000 Imperial personnel had been just moments before. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. "Admiral," his tactical officer said quietly, "the humans are transmitting again." The view screen showed President Chen once more, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood dozens of other humans, their faces dirty and determined. They looked like people who had been preparing for war their entire lives. "Admiral Zektar," Chen said, her voice carrying across space with absolute clarity. "We gave you fair warning. Earth does not surrender. Now you know why." Zektar found his voice. "This is impossible. Your species doesn't have this level of technology. You couldn't have built those weapons." Chen smiled grimly. "You're right. We couldn't have, 20 years ago. But you see, Admiral, your empire made a mistake. You sent scout ships to study us. Some of those ships crashed, and we humans are very good at reverse engineering things." The Admiral's blood turned cold. "The missing reconnaissance vessels?" "Every one of them," Chen confirmed. "We've been studying Imperial technology for 2 decades. Learning from it, improving on it, and most importantly, we've been preparing for the day you came for us." Around the bridge, Zektar could see his crew exchanging worried glances. This was not how conquests were supposed to proceed. Species were supposed to surrender when they saw the might of the Empire. They were not supposed to fight back with weapons that could destroy Imperial dreadnoughts. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports from across the fleet. The humans are launching coordinated attacks from hidden installations across their planet. Our formation is taking heavy casualties." Zektar turned to look at the tactical display. Red icons were flashing across the screen as Imperial vessels reported damage or worse. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. "How?" he whispered to himself. "How is this possible?" As if she had heard his question, President Chen's voice reached him across the void. "Because, Admiral, you underestimated what humans are capable of when we're fighting for our home." Earth versus Imperial Fleet. Second document. Commander Sarah "Viper" Rodriguez pulled her modified F-35 Lightning into a steep climb, her engines screaming as she pushed the aircraft beyond its original design limits. Behind her, a squadron of 12 other fighters followed in tight formation, their jets similarly modified with reverse-engineered Imperial technology. Below them, the burning wreckage of an Imperial frigate painted the Pacific Ocean in brilliant orange flames. "Control, this is Viper Squadron," she called over her radio. "Imperial frigate down. That's 3 confirmed kills for us today." "Copy that, Viper Squadron," came the reply from the underground command bunker hidden beneath Cheyenne Mountain. "Good hunting. We're tracking multiple Imperial dropships heading for the Australian continent. Vector 270, Angels 20. Rodriguez banked hard to port. Feeling the G-forces slam into her body despite the inertial dampeners her engineers had jury-rigged from salvaged Imperial tech. Around her, the sky was full of contrails as human aircraft engaged Imperial fighters in deadly aerial ballet. What the aliens didn't understand was that humans had been perfecting aerial combat for over a century. Their superior technology meant nothing if they couldn't use it effectively. "Viper Lead, I've got multiple contacts bearing down on Sydney," called out Lieutenant Martinez, her wingman. "Looks like they're trying to land ground forces." "Not today," Rodriguez muttered, pushing her throttle to maximum. "All Vipers, follow my lead. We're going downtown." The Imperial dropships were massive, ungainly vessels designed to carry thousands of troops to a planet's surface. They were heavily armored and well defended, but they had one critical weakness. They were slow. Human fighters, even ones designed decades earlier, could run circles around them. Rodriguez armed her modified missile systems, weapons that now carried miniaturized antimatter warheads, reverse-engineered from Imperial technology. The aliens had taught humanity many things during their covert reconnaissance missions over the past 20 years. Unfortunately for them, the most important lesson had been how to kill Imperial soldiers. "Target acquisition locked," she announced. "Fox 3." The missile screamed away from her fighter, followed by 11 more from her squadron. The Imperial dropship's point defense systems opened fire, filling the sky with energy beams. But the human missiles were small, fast, and numerous. 7 of them got through. The dropship simply vanished in a ball of antimatter fire that briefly outshone the sun. The shockwave rattled Rodriguez's fighter even from 5 kilometers away, and she had to fight to keep control as her aircraft bucked and rolled. "Splash 1 dropship," she reported with grim satisfaction. "Any survivors down there won't be in fighting condition." But even as she spoke, her radar operator was calling out new contacts. "Multiple Imperial fighters incoming, they look angry." Rodriguez smiled inside her helmet. "Let them come. Time to show these aliens how humans really fight." Meanwhile, on the ground in downtown Sydney, Captain James McKinnon crouched behind an overturned car as Imperial energy weapons scorched the air above his head. His unit, a mixed group of Australian Defence Force regulars and civilian volunteers, had been holding this city block for the past 6 hours against increasingly desperate Imperial ground forces. The aliens were good soldiers, McKinnon had to admit. They were disciplined, well-equipped, and clearly experienced in urban warfare. But they had made the mistake of thinking that human cities would be like the cities on other worlds they'd conquered. They were wrong. "Thompson!" McKinnon called out to his demolitions expert. "How are those charges coming?" "Almost ready, Cap," came the reply from across the street. "These Imperial power cells pack a hell of a punch when you wire them right." McKinnon nodded. The humans had learned early on that Imperial energy weapons and power systems made excellent improvised explosives when properly modified. It was just a matter of convincing the aliens to get close enough to the traps. "All units, fall back to secondary positions," McKinnon ordered over his radio. "Make them think we're retreating." The human forces began a carefully orchestrated withdrawal, appearing to flee in panic while actually drawing the Imperial troops deeper into the trap. The aliens took the bait, advancing confidently through the abandoned streets, their heavy weapons cutting through abandoned vehicles and storefronts. McKinnon waited until the Imperial forces were directly over the network of charges his people had planted throughout the city block. "Thompson, now!" The explosion was visible from orbit. 12 city blocks erupted in a coordinated detonation that sent a mushroom cloud rising over Sydney Harbor. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but a smoking crater, where 2,000 Imperial troops had been advancing. "This is McKinnon," the captain reported to his command structure. "Sydney downtown is secure. Imperial ground forces eliminated." But the victory was short-lived. Even as McKinnon was reporting his success, new contacts were appearing on radar screens around the world. The Imperial fleet was adapting, sending smaller, faster vessels to avoid the massive ground-based weapons that had destroyed their dreadnoughts. In the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the most unusual submarine in human history. The USS Leviathan had been built in secret over the past 15 years, incorporating every piece of Imperial technology humanity had been able to salvage or steal. It was massive, nearly the size of an aircraft carrier, but designed to operate completely submerged. "Sonar contact," reported her sensor operator. "Imperial vessels bearing 220, range 40,000 meters. Vasquez smiled coldly. The Imperial Navy was powerful in space, but they had no experience with underwater warfare. To them, Earth's oceans were just empty space filled with water. They had no idea that humans had been fighting beneath the waves for centuries. "Load tubes 1 through 6, she ordered. "Target the largest vessel. Let's see how well their shields work against supercavitating torpedoes." The Leviathan's weapons were a hybrid of human engineering and Imperial technology. Torpedoes that moved through water at impossible speeds, guided by sensors that could track energy signatures through hundreds of kilometers of ocean. Each warhead contained enough antimatter to crack a small asteroid. "Weapons away," her weapons officer reported. The torpedoes screamed through the water at nearly 200 knots, their supercavitating bubbles creating underwater contrails. The Imperial ships above had no warning until the weapons broke the surface and slammed into their hulls. 3 hits, the sensor operator reported with satisfaction. Imperial cruiser is breaking up. The other 2 vessels are heavily damaged and attempting to retreat. Vasquez nodded. "Surface the ship. Let's see if any of our Imperial friends want to surrender." As the Leviathan broke the surface of the Atlantic, its massive bulk rising from the depths like some ancient sea monster, the 2 surviving Imperial vessels found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a submarine the size of a battleship, bristling with weapons and crewed by humans who had learned to fight in 3 dimensions. The Imperial ships fled. Back in orbit, Admiral Zektar stared at the tactical displays with growing horror. His invasion force, the pride of the Imperial Navy, was being systematically destroyed by a species that shouldn't have been able to resist for more than a few hours. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were winning. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely concealed panic, "we've lost 60% of our ground forces. The humans have some kind of global communication network that allows them to coordinate their resistance efforts in real time. Every time we land troops, they're waiting for us." "What about our orbital bombardment capability?" Zektar demanded. "Limited, sir. The humans have deployed some kind of energy shield network over their major population centers. Our bombardment weapons can't penetrate it, and every time we move into lower orbit to increase weapon effectiveness, those ground-based cannons start targeting us." Zektar slammed his fist down on the command console. "How? How is this possible? Intelligence reports indicated this species was barely past the atomic age." "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human leadership. Put it through." President Chen appeared on screen once again, but this time she was clearly in some kind of military command center. Banks of monitors showed tactical displays of the ongoing battle, and Chen looked like she hadn't slept in days, but her eyes still held that same fierce determination. "Admiral Zektar," she said without preamble, "I thought you should know that your invasion has failed. You're down to less than 40% of your original fleet strength, and we haven't even started using our best weapons yet." "Impossible," Zektar growled. "You cannot have defeated the Imperial Navy with your primitive technology." Chen laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Primitive? Admiral, let me tell you something about human technology. 20 years ago, we found the wreckage of your first scout ship in the Pacific Ocean. 5 years later, we found another one in the Sahara Desert. Then another in the Amazon rainforest." Zektar felt his blood turn to ice. "The reconnaissance missions, every single one," Chen confirmed. "Your people were very good at staying hidden, but they weren't good enough. And every time we found one of your ships, we learned something new. Better weapons, better shields, better engines. But most importantly, we learned that you were coming." The Admiral stared at the human leader, finally beginning to understand the scope of the disaster that had befallen his fleet. "You've been preparing for this invasion for 2 decades. "Longer than that, actually," Chen said. "We've been preparing for this fight for our entire history as a species. Every war we've ever fought, every weapon we've ever built, every tactical innovation we've ever developed, it's all been leading up to this moment." "But your numbers," Zektar protested. "We have superior technology, superior firepower." "Do you?" Chen interrupted. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like we're kicking your ass with weapons we built in our basements using parts we scavenged from your crashed ships. Your technology isn't superior, Admiral. It's just different, and we've had 20 years to figure out how to beat it." Zektar found himself speechless as Chen continued. "You see, Admiral, Your empire has a fundamental flaw in its thinking. You assume that superior technology automatically means superior military capability. But technology is just tools, and humans are very, very good with tools. Sir, his sensor operator called out urgently. Massive energy buildup detected from the planet's surface. Multiple locations. The orbital defense platforms? Zektar asked. No, sir. These are new installations. Energy signatures are unprecedented. On the main view screen, points of light began appearing across Earth's surface. Not just a few, but hundreds. Each one represented a weapon system that made the orbital defense cannons look like children's toys. Admiral, Chen said, her voice carrying across the void with absolute certainty. You came here thinking you were going to conquer a primitive species. Instead, you've walked into a trap that we've been setting for 20 years. Those weapon platforms you're looking at? Each one has enough firepower to destroy your entire remaining fleet. Zektar stared at the displays showing the human weapon systems coming online. Energy readings were climbing beyond anything in his experience. You're bluffing. No single planet could possess that level of destructive capability. You're right, Chen agreed. No single planet could. But Earth isn't just one planet anymore, Admiral. For the past 20 years, we've been building. We've turned our entire world into a fortress. Every factory, every mine, every research facility has been focused on one goal, making sure that when you came for us, we'd be ready. The first of the new weapon platforms fired, sending a beam of energy across space that struck an Imperial battlecruiser. The ship's shields lasted for less than a second before the vessel was completely vaporized. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, I recommend immediate withdrawal. But Zektar knew it was already too late. His fleet was trapped in Earth's gravity well, surrounded by weapon systems that outclassed anything the Empire had ever built. The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapon, and they were about to use it. All ships, he commanded with resignation, prepare for final battle. We will show these humans the true might of the Empire. But even as he spoke the words, Admiral Zektar knew that the Imperial Navy was about to learn a lesson that would echo throughout the galaxy. Never underestimate a species that has spent its entire existence learning how to fight. Earth versus Imperial Fleet. Third document. The final phase of the battle began at precisely 1447 Universal Standard Time, when Admiral Zektar made the decision that would haunt the Imperial Navy for generations to come. With his fleet reduced to less than 30% of its original strength and surrounded by human weapons that defied every tactical manual in Imperial military doctrine, he ordered the activation of his most desperate gambit, the Planet Cracker. Deep in the belly of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, technicians worked frantically to charge the massive weapon that had been designed to shatter worlds. It was a weapon of last resort, something used only when the Empire decided that a planet's population was too dangerous to be allowed to survive. The energy requirements were enormous, and the weapon took nearly an hour to fully charge, but once fired, nothing could stop it. Planet Cracker charging, reported his weapons officer, a young Kellax who looked like he was about to be sick. Estimated time to full charge, 57 minutes. Sir, his tactical officer added quietly, using the Planet Cracker will kill everyone on the surface, all 8 billion humans. Zektar's 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display showing Earth's defensive positions. They chose to resist. The consequences are theirs to bear. But even as he spoke the words, Zektar felt a cold certainty that he was making a mistake. The humans had surprised him at every turn. What if they had prepared for this too? His question was answered 12 minutes later when his sensor operator called out in alarm, Sir, massive energy buildup detected on Earth's moon. The moon? Zektar spun around to look at the sensor displays. Impossible. Intelligence reports indicated the humans had only primitive installations there. Sir, something's opening on the lunar surface. It appears to be some kind of massive facility. Energy readings are off the charts. On the main view screen, the image shifted to show Earth's moon. What they saw defied belief. The entire visible face of the moon was opening like a flower, revealing a structure so massive it made the planet cracker look like a child's toy. "What in the name of the Empire is that?" Zektar whispered. His answer came in the form of a transmission from Earth's surface. President Chen appeared on screen once more, but this time she was smiling. It was not a reassuring expression. "Hello again, Admiral," she said pleasantly. "I see you've noticed our little moon base. We call it Luna Station. Took us 15 years to build it, but we think you'll find it impressive." "That's impossible," Zektar stated flatly. "Your species lacks the industrial capacity to build something of that scale." "Did we?" Chen asked. "Or did we just never show you what we were really capable of? You see, Admiral, while you were sending scout ships to study us, we were doing some studying of our own. We learned something very interesting about Imperial technology. It's incredibly efficient, but it's also standardized. Once you understand the basic principles, you can build bigger and better versions." The lunar installation finished opening, revealing what appeared to be the largest weapon ever constructed by any species in galactic history. The energy readings coming from the device were beyond anything in Imperial records. "Admiral," Chen continued, her voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction, "I'd like to introduce you to the Luna Cannon. It's essentially a scaled-up version of your planet cracker technology. We reverse-engineered it from the wreckage of your ships and then made it about 1,000 times more powerful." Zektar felt his legs give out. He collapsed into his command chair as the full implications of what he was seeing hit him. "You're going to destroy your own moon?" "Oh, no," Chen said, her smile widening. "We're going to destroy you." The Luna cannon began to charge, and the energy buildup was visible to the naked eye. The moon itself seemed to glow as incredible amounts of power flowed through the massive weapon system hidden beneath its surface. "Sir," his sensor operator reported in a voice that cracked with terror, "that weapon is charging. Energy output is approaching critical levels. If it fires..." "How long until the planet cracker is ready?" Zektar demanded. 41 minutes, sir." "How long until their weapon fires?" "Based on energy buildup rates." 6 minutes." Zektar closed his eyes. In 6 minutes, his fleet would cease to exist. The humans had outmaneuvered him completely, turning humanity's own moon into a weapon capable of destroying his entire armada. "Sir," his communications officer called out. "Transmission from Earth. Put it through." This time, it wasn't President Chen who appeared on screen. Instead, it was an elderly human male wearing what appeared to be a simple white laboratory coat. His hair was completely white, and his face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp with intelligence. "Admiral Zektar," the human said, "my name is Dr. Richard Nakamura. I'm the lead scientist for humanity's defensive technology project. I thought you might like to know how we did it." Despite the terror of his situation, Zektar found himself curious. "How did you build weapons that surpass Imperial technology?" Dr. Nakamura smiled. "We didn't. We built weapons that use Imperial technology the way it was meant to be used. You see, Admiral, your empire has spent so long conquering primitive species that you've forgotten how to innovate. Your technology hasn't advanced significantly in over 2,000 years. Our technology is the most advanced in the galaxy," Zektar protested. "Was," Nakamura corrected. "Past tense. You see, when we found your first crashed scout ship, we discovered something remarkable. Your technology is incredibly sophisticated, but it's also incredibly conservative. You've been using the same basic designs for millennia, just making minor improvements." The old scientist leaned forward slightly. "But humans don't think that way. When we see a design, we immediately start thinking about how to improve it, how to make it faster, more efficient, more powerful. In 20 years, We've advanced your technology further than your empire has in 2 millennia. Impossible. Is it? Nakamura asked. Look around you, Admiral. Your invincible fleet is being destroyed by weapons built in what you consider a primitive backwater planet. How impossible does it look now? Zektar had no answer. Around him, his bridge crew was preparing for the end. Some were praying to their ancestral spirits. Others were sending final messages to their families. All of them knew that in less than 4 minutes, they would be dead. Admiral, came President Chen's voice as she rejoined the transmission. I'm going to make you an offer, one chance to save what's left of your fleet and the lives of everyone aboard those ships. What do you want? Zektar asked, knowing he had no choice but to listen. Surrender, Chen said simply. Order your remaining ships to stand down and prepare to be boarded. Your crews will be treated according to the rules of war, and you'll be allowed to return to your empire with a message. What message? Chen's expression grew deadly serious. That Earth is under the protection of humanity, and any future Imperial fleets that approach this system will be destroyed without warning. You came here thinking you were conquering a primitive species. Instead, you've just witnessed the birth of a new galactic power. Zektar looked at his tactical displays. 37 ships left out of the 300 he'd brought to this system. Thousands of Imperial personnel dead or captured, and now facing a weapon that could destroy what remained of his fleet in a single shot. If I surrender, he asked, what guarantee do I have that you won't simply destroy us anyway? None, Chen admitted, except that despite what you might think about humans being primitive, we do have something your empire seems to lack: honor. We don't murder prisoners of war, and we don't break our word. Zektar felt something he hadn't experienced in his 4 decades of military service: respect for an enemy. These humans had outfought, outthought, and outmaneuvered him at every turn. But they were offering mercy to a defeated foe. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered urgently, 90 seconds until that weapon fires. Zektar straightened in his command chair. All Imperial vessels, this is Admiral Zektar. Cease all combat operations and prepare to surrender. Power down all weapons systems. The relief on his bridge was palpable. But even as his crew began following surrender protocols, Zektar found himself wondering what would happen when word of this defeat reached the Imperial capital. The Empire had never been defeated by a single planet before. The political ramifications would be enormous. Admiral, President Chen's voice reached him across the void, you've made the right choice. Your crews will be well treated, and you'll be returned to Imperial space within the month. And the message you want me to deliver? Chen's expression grew cold. Tell your Imperial Council that Earth is no longer interested in their games. Tell them that humanity has graduated from being potential subjects to being a peer power, and tell them that if they ever threaten our world again, we won't offer surrender terms. The Luna cannon powered down, its massive energy signature fading as the weapon systems went offline. Around Earth, the orbital defense platforms maintained their targeting locks on the Imperial vessels, but held their fire. Admiral, Dr. Nakamura added, you might also mention that we've learned a great deal about Imperial technology from your ships, including how to track them. If any Imperial vessel enters human space without permission, we'll know about it long before it reaches Earth. Zektar nodded slowly. And if I refuse to deliver this message? Then you won't make it back to Imperial space, Chen said matter-of-factly. We've spent 20 years preparing for this day, Admiral. We've thought of everything. As human boarding parties began docking with Imperial vessels to accept their surrender, Zektar found himself thinking about the reports he would have to write. How do you explain to the Imperial High Command that a species they considered barely advanced enough to be worth conquering had just handed the Imperial Navy its worst defeat in over 1,000 years? The answer, he realized, was that you told them the truth. Humanity was no longer a primitive species to be conquered. They were a military power that had just announced their presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. 3 months later, Admiral Zektar stood before the Imperial High Council on the capital world of Kethmoria. His uniform had been stripped of all rank insignia, and he knew that his military career was effectively over, but he had survived to deliver his message, which was more than most of his fleet could say. The human resistance was more organized than anticipated, he reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his failure. They had been preparing for our arrival for approximately 20 years and had reverse-engineered our technology to build superior weapon systems. Superior to Imperial technology? The High Chancellor's voice dripped with disdain. Impossible. I witnessed it myself, High Chancellor. The humans destroyed 2/3 of my fleet with weapons that exceeded our most optimistic projections for their technological advancement. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the council chambers. Several council members demanded to know how a species barely past the atomic age could have defeated an Imperial fleet. They learned from us, Zektar explained. Every reconnaissance mission we sent to their system. Every crashed ship, every piece of technology we left behind. They studied it all, improved upon it, and used our own advances against us. And their message? The High Chancellor demanded. Zektar straightened, preparing to deliver words that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Earth declares itself a sovereign world under the protection of humanity. They demand recognition as an independent power and warn that any future Imperial incursions into their space will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. The council chamber erupted in outrage. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Imperial Council had been the supreme authority in this sector of space. No single planet had ever successfully resisted their authority, much less demanded recognition as an equal power. But as the shouting died down and the implications of Zektar's report began to sink in, a new understanding emerged. Humanity had not just defeated an Imperial fleet. They had announced to the galaxy that the age of uncontested Imperial expansion was over. On Earth, President Chen stood in the rebuilt United Nations building in New York, looking up at the stars through the massive windows that had replaced the walls destroyed during the battle. Around the world, humans were celebrating their victory and rebuilding their cities, but Chen knew that the real work was just beginning. Madam President, her aide approached with a data tablet. The first diplomatic missions from other species are requesting permission to enter Earth space. It seems word of our victory has spread. Chen smiled. How many? 47 different species so far, and more are arriving every day. Some are former Imperial subjects who want to know how we achieved independence. Others are neutral powers who want to establish trade relations. And the Empire? No official contact yet, but our deep space monitoring stations report that Imperial fleet movements throughout the sector have decreased significantly. It appears they're recalling ships from conquest missions to evaluate their strategic position. Chen nodded. The victory over Admiral Zektar's fleet had been just the beginning. Now came the harder task, building a new kind of civilization that could stand as an equal among the stars while never forgetting the lessons that had made their survival possible. As she watched, a formation of human spacecraft streaked across the sky above New York. Not the crude, desperate vessels that had fought against the Imperial invasion, but sleek new ships built with perfected human Imperial hybrid technology. The Earth Defense Fleet was already expanding beyond the solar system, establishing monitoring stations and early warning networks that would ensure no enemy ever again caught humanity unprepared. But perhaps most importantly, human delegations were already reaching out to other species, sharing the technological advances that had made their victory possible. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity had learned one final lesson from their long history of warfare. Sometimes the best way to ensure your own survival is to help others survive as well. The age of Imperial domination was ending, and the age of human expansion was about to begin. And this time, humanity would not be the species being conquered. They would be the ones offering liberation to others who had spent centuries under the Imperial boot. Admiral Zektar had been right about one thing. The humans had indeed graduated. They had graduated from being potential victims to being the galaxy's newest protectors. And they intended to make sure that no species ever again had to face an Imperial fleet alone. The message was clear. Earth had not just won a battle. Humanity had won the right to determine their own destiny among the stars.